Pleasure to be here with you. Um, Obviously, I'm very fond of North Carolina, and in terms of my career, this place, this community was instrumental. So I wanted to talk tonight a little bit about some of the work that we've been doing at Charlotte FC in terms of building a club identity from scratch. Some days I wake up and it's very exciting, and other days it's quite daunting, as you can imagine. And just like everybody else, we've navigate what's happened, especially in 2020. And as you probably know, we'll begin first team in 2022 now. So we have a little bit of time and space. But without further ado, I'd like to start by just showing you our sort of club manifesto and let you have a quick read of it. So I think that the gist of this, of course, is that although our name is Charlotte FC, we are made up of North and South Carolina. That, in terms of our academy programming, is what's referred to as our homegrown territory, and we're very proud of that. We're very aware that these communities produce wonderful soccer and wonderful soccer players over the course of time, and it's very important for us to be a very welcoming club. We are an ambitious club, but in terms of some of our ambition, which is to produce our own players as well as scan the rest of the world, everybody on this call is a very important component to that. And I'll show you what I mean by that as we progress through this. So in terms of our club pillars, values, if you like, these are what we come up with input from the club president, ownership, and technical staff. And when we look at what we talk about from like sort of a PR and marketing, um, this is what we come up with. And then below it, I'll show you sort of a translation, if you like, of what that means to us from a soccer perspective. And so when we talk about being progressive, we're talking about playing a progressive style. And as you can see there, progressive with intelligence and speed, which is based upon evidence. I think when it comes to us, we want to be very positive with the way that we play. We think that this connects to who we are and who we are as a city and a club. And we think that that sort of connection between who you are and the type of city you are is actually quite relevant. It's not unusual, for example, for a port city like a Dortmund or a Liverpool to play a certain way. And we're going to try and play a way which we think is relevant to Charlotte and to North and South Carolina. Then, of course, the collective. And basically what we're saying is, of course, from a youth development perspective, the job is to develop the individual. But we can never get away from the fact that soccer is 11v11 and we're always playing for the team. And for us, in terms of a soccer sense, that means with the ball, without the ball at all times, at every moment of the game, from the first whistle till the end. It's very important that we stress that in terms of how we want to play, in terms of the type of team that we want to develop, and in terms of the type of people that we want to develop. And then it's not a contradiction to be humble and play for the team and respectful, but at the same time have big ambition. And we do have big ambition here at the club, and that's the ambition for our players to be the best players that they can be, for our club to be competitive from the first minute that we kick off in 2022, and for us to establish ourselves as one of the best in MLS and maybe over time in the Americas. So we feel like we have a very dynamic city, and we want to reflect that by the type of soccer that we want to play throughout the whole club. So what is North Carolina? Well, I guess we could do a little bit of a quiz. Does anybody on the call here know the state motto of North Carolina off the top of their head? I've got a few quiz questions for you, so don't be afraid to unmute and make something up. But if you are too scared, The state motto of North Carolina is to be rather than to see. And I really like that because for me, when we talk about the translation of that, it's no nonsense, not being pretentious. It's about honest and humility and being humble, but also living for today. And so all of these things that are the very fabric of who we are and where we live have surely got to reflect on how we play, how we behave, and how we act and develop as a club. And of course, we can't, I know this is a North Carolina youth soccer presentation, but of course, we are only a few miles from the South Carolinian border. And does anybody have a guess about what South Carolina's state motto is? Billy did say there's some significant prizes for those who answer correctly to any of these questions.
Yeah, and if you don't want to unmute yourself, you can always type what you think the answer is in the chat function as well.
Yeah, these aren't maybe the easiest questions, but now what is South Carolina? Well, their state motto is "While I breathe, I hope." Now, while that might not be as positive as the North Carolinian state motto, I think it has some interesting translation into the way that we might play, and that is to fight and play till the end and never give up, and overcome the adversity that occurs whenever you have and you play a sport, and you win some and you lose some. So I think both of those sort of state mottos are really healthy and something that can relate to the players that we bring in, the players that we develop. So in terms of that player development, this is the Carolinas, North and South. A guess for the population? Come on, somebody tell me how many million, both states. I did see that Wade had joined. I can't believe he hasn't made a wild guess at something.
Yeah, Wade said 17 million.
Not bad, Wade. Well done. It's 16 million. And when you look at that and you look at these countries, I won't do the flag test because we don't have enough people brave enough to say anything. But when we look at Holland, which is in the top left corner here, there's 17 million. Belgium, 11.4. Portugal, 10.3. Croatia, 4. Wales, 3. And Uruguay, 3.5. You know, these are nations that have been in the final four of Euros, the final four of the World Cup, and as you know, have developed some of the best players in the world in recent history. So if they can do that with smaller populations or similar populations, why can't we have the ambition to do something similar right here in this territory of ours? So with that said, it's important to know what player development is and how is the best way to develop players. And obviously within North and South Carolina and with the US in itself, there's a very rich college culture. And we know that within the college is that players come out at 22 and 23. But there's an important data point here, which I want to stress. And as you can see, Manchester City have done this research. And basically the best players in the world, what do you think the percentage is of how many have made their professional debut at the age of 17? Any wild guesses? Anybody brave enough with this one, Billy?
Yeah, you got 35%.
35, okay.
Wade said 25%. Catherine said 35%.
Okay.
Ooh, James Sharp, 50%.
Okay. So it's quite a staggering data point. And basically 83% of the best players in the world have made their professional debut at 17. And when you think about the young Americans that have done well and largely progressed overseas, whether it's Rayner at Dortmund or Pulisic also at Dortmund, McKinney at Schalke and now at Juventus, they've gone and they've tested themselves very early. And we feel that maybe in MLS there isn't enough of this. And when you think about MLS as a league where there's no promotion and relegation, there's half the teams make the playoffs. What could be a better environment to give young players a chance? And so this is going to be a very important part of what we do, and really have this attitude that if you're good enough, you're old enough. And this is all very relevant and important to our first team, and also for those of you that are on this call, because we're going to be brave with this. And so there's an example here of the journey of a player. And as you, many of you will know Brandt, and many of you will know that he's been our third signing. And while we're, acting globally, we've already signed a player from Australia and another from Spain. We are very much thinking locally. And I sort of started to have a look a little bit today at Brandt's journey. And, essentially it started here. And you can see, I couldn't find a Jamestown Jammers logo. I'm wondering if it's a club anymore. But this is Brandt here in the bottom left-hand corner. He's probably about 10 or 11 or possibly 12 here. His journey then went to Greensby United. It may have been Greensby Youth Soccer at the time. I couldn't quite remember. And then from there, we formed the fusion together. The old joke that maybe in year 1 or 2 it was the confusion is still amuses me and tickles me. And obviously that's the old badge, Scott. I wanted to bring back the old one. And within that time at Greensboro and the fusion, Brandt also played in the ODP system in North Carolina. At 17, now it's not, at Real Madrid or Bayern Munich, but he made his debut. I was the coach actually of the North Carolina Dynamo, which is now, I believe, the Fusion. So there's also a little bit of historical context here in terms of hardly any of these clubs exist anymore, which goes to show how quickly our game is evolving, changing and adapting. But we gave Brandt his debut as a young player, him and Jonathan Campbell, both of which went on to play in MLS for a number of years in Jonathan's case, and most recently he won the MLS Cup last year with Seattle, retired now. But Brandt is somebody that's an interesting journey, because as a young player here in the team, many would have considered him to be, maybe the third or fourth best player. But his attitude and willingness, and when we talk about the state motto in terms of work ethic and humility and really making the most out of himself and fight until the end, he really embodied that. And of course, his journey then also went to here in Charlotte with the University of Charlotte, North Carolina. So we're delighted to get Brandt here. He is. He will be 25 by the time we start, but a great example of a player that's come through the system here. And our goal in the future would be for the likes of Brandt and many others to give them that professional debut at the age of 17 in front of 40,000 here in Charlotte. So you can see there the importance of the great work that's done through all of the system, all of the youth clubs, all of the coaches, teachers, trainers, club officials that have helped him on this journey. So with that, we have a very specific mission for the club and its developmental arm. And that is, if they can do it in Holland and Belgium and elsewhere, why can't we develop homegrown players comparable to the world's best? We have wonderful conditions, we have great coaches, great facilities, great weather, and I think a really rich talent. And so for us, starting in 2023, we want to provide from the developmental arm of the club to the first team arm of the club 2 players. You never know. We have some very interesting under 17 players currently that may be ready in 2022. But we want to have this global network of talent, but also we're very, very ambitious in terms of developing our own players here from North Carolina. And we're going to give them the chance. And not only is it about sustainability and connection, it's also about winning and having these local players who understand what it's like to be from North Carolina, who understand what it's like to travel to the altitude of Colorado and Salt Lake, or the freezing conditions of Toronto or Montreal, or the blazing heat of Orlando or Houston, or maybe even the playing on turf in some of the clubs in the Northwest, which maybe some of our foreign players haven't experienced. And so we're really trying to find this blend of of the worldwide quality as well as the local quality. And we feel that this is a really important strategy of our club as we develop it. This is what we look like this year. We decided to start small with the developmental part. Obviously, all of this starts with the community and the grassroots. Over time, we hope to make official partners and affiliations. And many of those we have right now are informal, and we've developed that really positive relationship with many youth clubs, and we're really happy with the way that's gone. We decided to start at under 14 and under 17 to fill a wide gap, with the hope that as we progress, we'll start to really fill this out. We've already began this discovery program, which, for those of you that don't know, brings in young players twice a week. And we send those young players then back to their clubs where they can train and play with their friends as well as compete at the weekend. We're very much conscious of not making people travel too young. We feel that it's not necessary, and that there's a race to the bottom when you look at many academies throughout the world who are bringing in 6-year-olds and 7-year-olds. We don't feel that's necessary here. And so our first full-time team, if we continue in this way, will be at under 14. Under 15 and under 17, we'll start then to branch out and play more in terms of MLS opponents. And then we feel, back to that data point of Manchester City, that at 17 years old, so when maybe you finish that under 17 program or even slightly before, that you should be ready to train with the first team, potentially play with the first team, but at the very minimum play with the reserve team, which is another arm of the club that we will encompass into youth development as we progress. So I would expect that in the next couple of years, you'll see us have a professional arm in terms of the reserves as well as obviously the first team. We're very fortunate with our staff with the youth development, and the one thing that this year of 2020 did for us was enable us to establish the academy, and that's why this is dominating and this discussion, and also I think really relevant, more relevant to the people on the call. And you can see already here we've built a real team around the player, and we've done this gradually, we've done this steadily, and we're very fortunate in that we have these resources for what essentially right now is only 2 full-time teams. And so we're really beginning to build out this infrastructure, and you'll see a similar infrastructure being built with our first team part as we ramp up for that this year too. You've probably seen that we've hired a president, and while we've been very fortunate with being able to lean on the Panthers in terms of HR and marketing and all of the other parts of the club, we will now begin to hire and identify people specifically for our Charlotte FC. We've done that here with the academy. We'll continue to build that out, but we'll also now really begin to ramp that up. And so playing these academy games and highlighting the program has really helped with the identity of the club. And of course, we would much prefer there not to be a pandemic and for us to be starting next month. But at the same time, we've really been able to accelerate, I think, the philosophy of the play of the academy, as well as the awareness of what it is and what's around it. So from within all that, we then come up with a bunch of words. And you hear these words being bandied about a lot, don't you, with soccer. And what we said was, okay, well, here's a bunch of words and we can add some, take some away. But we said to ourselves, all right, if you were to pick 5 of these words, what do you want to see? What reflects us? Who do we want to be? And so maybe just take a second to have a look at that and think about, what 5 words you would pick. But we went through this as a staff with the sporting director, the director of scouting, myself, and Dan, who's the academy manager, and a few others. And we said, what are we? Who are we? How does what we've discussed there relate to this? And the words we come up with were the following. We want to be proactive, so we want to be on the front foot. We want to be positive with our play, and we want to take the game to the opponent. We want to create a lot of chances, and although we will value possession, we're not going to be obsessed with it. If any of you watch the MLS Cup final, you'll see that Columbus beat Seattle 3-0, and Seattle had 65% of the possession. And so, for us, what is possession? It's very much a means to an end in terms of this chance creation. So we'd much rather talk about that. We think that creating chances is entertaining, and by being proactive, you're also entertaining because you're leaving yourself a little bit vulnerable by keeping a high line, by flooding players forward, in particular the fullbacks. And of course, we've already talked about the collective, which fits into everything that we want to embody. And at the same time, we've got to have intelligent players who can adjust and adapt to the changing demands of the game, as well as those who can react to the conditions, the opponent, and manage each match, which of course is its own entity in itself. So these are the words that we come up together with, and then a paragraph or two on a little bit of a statement of intent in terms of the playing style. And so I'll let you have a read of that, but we feel that all of this is related to being a club that's in North Carolina, that's based in Charlotte, that has a territory of North and South, and that can hopefully be something that our fans and the people within the territory, the soccer people and new people to the game can see. And I think that's the biggest challenge of a new club. Others have had decades, sometimes a century and a half to create who they are, and so it's really important that you actually stand for something, because if you just make it up and you change week to week, it's very difficult, I think, to be successful in the end. Now, we're not saying that we won't adjust, adapt, change, and move with the times. Of course we will, but it's very important that we have certain non-negotiables and a certain amount of a framework in order for us to compete and succeed. And then, of course, we can go into all sorts of the soccer part of that. You've probably seen this kind of slide in just about every club, and every club's got a very similar slide to this. And these are just some of the language that we will use throughout. And some very specific targets, like creating 9 shots on target, we believe leads to 3 goals a game. And if you score 3 goals a game, you win 96% of the matches. And so, this is about, the elements of the game about this positive attacking approach that we'll have. And then within that is this use of evidence, which we used a lot previously in Seattle. We have an owner that's very much interested in analytics and embraces data. And although we're not going to be data driven, we will definitely be data informed. And we've started to look at these player profiles, which we think suit the playing style that we just discussed, which is a little bit different for the one we talked about in Seattle that we had previously. But here we look at the job description, if you like, of a winger, and it helps us then in terms of what is a successful performance. Well, over here, we feel our winger needs to make 25 passes. And you can see here the pass success rate needs to be 80%. 3 crosses a game, which involves, 1.1 involved in a goal a game. And so these metrics are interesting for us to consider. And each of them will have a video that goes along with them. You can see the position of the winger here and the inside shoulder and creating chances. And so, for the young players and senior players alike, there's going to be all kinds of these data points in terms of, I played well. Well, did you? Well, here's your job. And, we talk about here of you being in a position to win the ball back. And we want it to be won back 4 times. And you've only won it back once. And so it enables a little bit of clarity It enables a little bit of accountability, and it enables us to have a common theme and language throughout the club in terms of who we are, where we're going, and what we want out of the individual as well as the team. And this is something that Mark Simpson actually, who was previously with the Fusion, come up with in terms of our evidence-based coaching. And what you're looking at there, the data is as follows: 86.3% of goals are scored in this area, the green area there. And then the other part around this is where assists are made, and you can see here that 17% of goals originate from, in terms of the assist, this box cross area, and 37.8 are created in this area. So a lot of when we talk about chance creation is about how we train then to work to get the ball into these areas in order to get the ball into the goal that you saw with Dortmund there, into this central area where most goals are scored. And so the use of data and using that to enhance the player. And we have to remember now that players have changed. They've been brought up on FIFA. They're used to video. They're used to data. They relate to it. And so what we're trying to do with that is to very much tap into that in terms of the profile of the player and the explanation of what is success. And of course we have to be careful of data. I think it was a famous joke. I think it was Harry Redknapp or somebody said, this weekend we won't bother turning up. We'll just play my computer against yours. And while that was a joke, you kind of understand that, we have a lot of coaches now that are laptop coaches, and we can never get away from the human element. But there are certain themes and facts that come within soccer. We were told growing up in England that you've got to get the ball in the mixer, which I think is probably the mixer would probably be this kind of area. And if you were here, you'd be putting the ball into the mixer. Well, I think that's successful about 1.8% of the time. So, maybe if we'd have had this information back a few years ago, we could have actually said, well, actually, no, the mix is not a good place. It might be a good place in the 93rd minute, but for the most part, we want to work the ball and make runs into these areas because we know that only good things happen when we get the ball into there. So it's very important for us to embrace this way of thinking, which in terms of soccer isn't that conventional. So sometimes we have to do a little bit of convincing around that too. And then, of course, we have a chance to establish something. You probably saw at the World Cup that the Japanese team, a disappointing, I think, quarter-final or last 16 exit, but the players cleaned the locker room and left a note of thanks. So there's a real sort of humility that comes with that. And, we all, I think everybody on this squad be astonished if they didn't during the worst part of lockdown, which I think was March or April, watch the Michael Jordan documentary. Everybody I've spoken to in the whole world has watched that. And of course, that was really about never quitting and being tough and psychologically strong. The All Blacks are a great example where, they also clean up after themselves and have this idea that they don't need people to look after them. They're going to look after themselves. So they have this internal empowerment. And then, of course, to be honest, not my favourite team, my favourite guy. I'm still mourning the Saints' loss the other night. Please don't tell David Tepper that I like the Saints. Haven't got that one quite in there yet. But, you see a lot of, these flashy stuff of all these quotes and mountains and this, that, and the other. And Bill Belichick's quite simply is do your job. And I really like that simplicity. And throughout all of this, especially when it comes to the young player, we know that the road to the top is very rarely up, a mountain highway. It's very winding, and this kind of feels like where we are as a club right now, in terms of gathering momentum, signing players, building an infrastructure, developing an academy. We're going to be surprised, and we're going to wake up and be shocked. There's going to be certain things this year that we don't know yet, And so we have to have a positive approach to that and enjoy that journey. So whether this is a young player aiming to reach the top, or a coach on a similar path, or a club developing like ours, this is what it looks like, and this is what we have to try and enjoy. So I covered a lot of things there. I'd be happy to go back and answer any questions you might have on any of that. Feel free to ask any questions that you might have, and I'll be happy to share or elaborate anything else that's on your mind, or you might think is relevant to you or your club.
Thanks, Mark, for that. If anybody has any questions, okay. Can you give them there was one question came out. I don't know if you can see it, Mark, or not, but can you give more information on the Homestay Program?
Yeah, it's a good question, because from previous experience in Seattle, we had players from Alaska, Hawaii, Las Vegas, California. In Seattle, we had to look under the car for the players. We couldn't find them. It's quite a unique area in terms of the geography. So we were trying to find the players everywhere, and had to branch out. And so you can imagine the Homestay Program there was quite involved, because you're essentially taking players and flying them quite a long way away from their families. Here we've got no players from out of our territory. The Homestay Program, if you live in Raleigh or Charleston or Wilmington or Asheville or Greenville or wherever it might be, you can at least be in regular contact with your child. You can watch them play at the weekend. And so that's a real bonus for us here. We've decided to do a Homestay Program where the players live with families. We'd rather not right now have just kids who play soccer get together. There's a human responsibility program, as well as a Homestay Program, and that is, we want, we're aware that 2 to 3% of the players are going to make it. And so what's really important is that they're good citizens, and they have at least a little bit of normality to their life. Now, whether that changes and adjusts over time, we'll have to wait and see. But right now we have 5 players in that program, and we anticipate that up quite quickly, to the point where we've actually budgeted, I think, for 10 to 12 for next year. And typically we wouldn't begin that program until probably around under 15. Although we'd never put ourselves in a hole and not taken under 14, but we think that's a little bit young to be away from your family. We found that under 15 is pretty much the sweet spot. And if you think about this ambition of a 17-year-old playing for the first team, it's important for us to have them in the academy program for a couple of years before then.
Thanks, Mark, for that. Any other questions for Mark? I don't see any more questions, Mark. I want to thank you for taking the time out of your day to present to us. Hold on. Got another one. So are there, the one question is, are there opportunities to come and watch the academies train?
Yeah, we're very open. We have a lot of guests. We don't have parents inside the training ground, but if ever you wanted to come, anybody wanted to come and watch and chat with the coaches, I probably go to the academy once or twice a week as well. We're very happy to have any guests, and we're very, like I said, we're very open. We'll share the session plans, we'll share our weekly plan, everything that we do with that. We're very open and willing, and feel obliged to open our doors to everybody in that sense.
Is there a procedure for that, Mark, or they just show up? How would that work?
Yeah, we just appreciate that you contacted myself or Dan Locke, who's the academy manager, and Billy can put you in touch with me, and we can go from there. But we just say that you give us a day or two's notice, and that way we make sure that we know what field we're on, and that something hasn't changed in terms of the schedule, and you'd be very welcome to come. 100%.
All right, cool. Thanks, Mark, for that. Any other questions for Mark? If not, I'd like to thank Mark for taking the time out of his busy schedule to be with us tonight. And I want to wish you all the luck in the world, Mark, and anything that we can do to help you. Anyone on this call, just reach out and we'll help you as much as we can. You know that.
No, thank you, guys. I appreciate it, the opportunity, and again, I'm grateful for many of the people on this call and helping me and our club grow. We're very excited about where it could take us. We'll see.
Cool. Thank you, Mark.